A lot on the line on Saturday as Florida State takes on Boston College at 3:30 inside Doak Campbell Stadium. Nole Insiders Lane Hurt and Tim Linnefelt here with you. Tim, there's no secret, bowl streak on the line. Noles need to win their last two games. That starts with BC. How big is this one for this team?
I think it's really big for a lot of reasons. That's probably the biggest one. You're talking about generations worth of bowl games and a streak that's really become a point of pride for this football program. Nobody else can lay claim to anything like it right now. And so, yeah, that's important. Nobody on that team wants to be on the team that let the bowl streak slide or let it get away. And then aside from that, I look back to what happened against Boston College last year in Chestnut Hill, a 35-3 game, a really just a night where you sort of looked and said, what the heck is happening right now? Boston College played a great game, Florida State didn't, and that was a time last season where if you weren't already thinking that something wasn't right, you knew then. And I think in a lot of ways that sort of set in motion the events that led to the change in coaching staff and all the changes we've seen in the program over the last year. But the fact is, there's still players on the roster who were in that game and were part of that loss to Boston College. It's an opportunity for them to make right and get a little bit of payback on Boston College. So to me, I think that's an immediate motivator. Obviously, the bowl streak counts as well. It's about as big as it gets for this type of game.
For me, it starts with Florida State's defense trying to slow down A.J. Dillon and the Boston College Eagle offense. Dillon, the reigning ACC Player of the Year, looks like he's about as healthy as he's been since the beginning of the season. How big of a task is it to try to slow down a physical Boston College offense?
It really is. I mean, A.J. Dillon, he's beefy, man. He's 6 foot, 245 pounds. Stop and imagine that for a second. This ain't a Warwick Dunn type you're talking about. I mean, he's a big guy, broken tackles. And it's going to be interesting, I think, too, because, obviously Florida State's run defense has had a tough time in the last few weeks. But, in some respects, those offenses and those rushing attacks were different than, I think, what BC wants to do. I mean, they're going to line up, play one-on-one, our lineman against your front seven and our running back against, anybody who's unblocked. And they just intend to beat you physically. And that's what they've kind of fostered under Coach Steve Adazio. He's a former offensive lineman himself, a former offensive line coach. And they have the look of a team that's coached by a former offensive lineman, And so for Florida State, I don't want to say it's a test of manhood necessarily, but it's going to be a physical game, and they're going to try to out-physical you and beat you down, and then get, like the way those games go, get in the third and fourth quarter, and whoever doesn't want to get hit anymore is probably going to, be who loses that game. And so that's the game they like to play. Florida State says they're up for the challenge. It's the kind of game I think as a football player, as a competitor, you're like, all right, let's go, let's do it, especially, if the weather looks like today. I mean, it's a football type of game, but, we'll see, because I do think it's going to be a challenge, and one that Florida State hasn't had to face often this season. It's going to be a little bit different.
For Florida State's offense, it's been the same story all season. Against Notre Dame, the rushing attack looked to make some progress, but the wide receivers had a bunch of drops. It's been one thing or another. Can this be the week Florida State maybe put some of those inconsistencies aside and get moving in the right direction?
It's another opportunity, right? I think the number one priority for them, and you've kind of heard the coaches allude to it over the last week or so, is you got to quit falling into these early holes. I mean, you think about the second play of the game at Notre Dame. You win the coin toss, you receive the ball, you try to get something going, say, hey, let's get the ball, let's go down and score, and give ourselves a good chance. And on the second play of the game, you drop a pass, it falls into a defender's arms, and he returns to the 3-yard line. I mean, that just kills you. And you're down, in that game, you're down 17-0 before the second quarter. NC State was a similar story. Clemson, you hung on for a quarter, but you were into a big deficit. And one, I think that's just so deflating to have that happen. Two, on a more practical sense, and Willie Taggart talked about it today in his interview, said, look, when you're down 2-3 scores early in the game, the way they've been these last few weeks, it changes what you can do. Your game plan is pretty much completely out the window. Any attempt to run the ball, and they have been running the ball better. I thought the offensive line has blocked a little bit better. But when you're down 17 points in the first quarter, you can't run the ball, because now you're working against the clock, against a team that also likes to run the ball. So you have to, at that point, you have to extend the game as much as you can, so it makes you one-dimensional. And it just, sort of snowballs. It's not hard to see how these things happen. So to me, if you're Florida State, and it's the same as it's been for the last month and a half, right? Protect the ball. Try to run the ball as you can. Stay away from those penalties. Stay on the right side of the turnover margin, and give yourself the best chance to win. I think that's been the theme for me for Florida State over the last few weeks, and what's been, to me, probably the most disappointing is that you left those games feeling like, one, of course, Notre Dame, Clemson, even NC State, they're probably in better places right now in their development as programs. But for Florida State, you left those games feeling like you didn't give yourself your best chance to win. And if you do that, if you play a clean game and give yourself your best chance and you come up short, you know what, you can live with that. Now you know what you have to work on moving forward. But you know, it's frustrating when you don't do that. And so that's what I want to see more than anything from Florida State is do everything you can to give yourself a chance, your best opportunity, you're a good, clean, honest effort. And I think if you do that, you might have a pretty good chance to actually win it.
There you have it, Seminole fans. It's the Noles and the Eagles on Saturday at 3:30, Military Appreciation Day. Make sure you're in the stands early. B-52 flyover before the game, plus a lot of other things to honor our veterans as well. And of course, we'll have everything you need post-game, as well as Florida State looks to extend that bowl streak. For Tim, I'm Lane. Go Noles.